All right, everybody. Thank you for joining me for another Her Wild Outdoors episode. Tonight, we are recording from my kitchen table after we just had a great dinner, and Daniel Holder is with me from the Hunt, Fish, Eat podcast.
Yes, ma'am.
Daniel, thank you for joining me.
That's my pleasure, man. Thank you for cooking dinner.
For dinner.
Really good, yeah.
Well, we both got to experience something that we had never experienced before, and I purposefully saved the unveiling.
I'm grateful that you saved that unveiling for me. I don't know if I'm grateful, but it was good.
I went a couple of weeks ago and filled 2 Sandhill Crane tags. And I still have the breast in the freezer, but...
Oh, so you do have the breast.
I do.
The good parts. Okay. I just want to make sure.
I do. I'm saving them for another experience. But when I did something that I'd never done before to have you over for dinner, which is usually what I end up doing.
Yeah.
Hey, y'all come over for dinner, and I don't do the thing that I'm really great at. I go, let's experiment.
So I think what it was, you're like, this is going to be a lot of work. So Daniel's coming over. I'm going to put him to work, make him do some stuff. You know?
Yes. That's
it.
Exactly what it is. And honestly, the thing that I kept hearing about these Sandhill Crane legs was how tough they were going to be. Yeah. And you and I both found
that to be true.
It was so true.
You know, they call Sandhill Crane ribeye of the sky, and I don't think they're talking about the legs.
They're not talking about the legs.
No. It's a different animal.
And you had said they're comparable to turkey legs.
Yep, for sure.
But those tendons, there were so many of them, it felt like fish bones as we were going through it. It is definitely a labor of love.
For sure. For sure.
So, see, you should feel very welcomed in my home and in Tennessee.
Is that like a Tennessee thing?
I don't know. No, I should. I said it in the end. I should have just grabbed the snow goose out of the freezer.
It was still really good. I liked it. We had some tacos, but
it was good. Well,
I think you and I are talking. So I've eaten duck legs, goose legs, turkey legs, frog legs. This is definitely the toughest legs. But I think the flavor is still really good.
The flavor was great. And just to let you guys know, I cooked it with a sous vide for 12 hours. And you would kind of think, that would be a low, slow cook. But...
I was surprised how tough they were after 12 hours. That was, I've cooked a lot of stuff in a sous vide, and they were still really tough.
But maybe next time you had said, if you bump up the heat, that might
I'm thinking
it a little bit.
Because we're kind of troubleshooting afterward. Not that it was great. It was very delicious. I'm very thankful for you. But we're trying to troubleshoot, how would we make this better? And I think hotter for longer. You said, 140 or 130? I was thinking if you bump that up to 160 or 165, another 12 hours, that might... Because... I've done it with snow goose legs and turkey legs. If you just do it long enough, it just falls off the bones. There's so many of the little bones, but
this one did not do that.
Did not, no. Well, in the size, for those that have never hung out with Sandhill Cranes, they're in between a goose and a turkey, I guess, in size.
Yeah.
So it wasn't an insignificant amount of meat. There's a lot on there. It was just getting it off.
I mean, I was using a knife to shave it off at times, and it's and it did. It felt like fish bones inside as you were pulling the meat off of those tendons. So, if I get a Sandhill Crane again, I will definitely keep the legs. I might delegate that out to a friend who wants to try it.
Person that doesn't know any better.
A good experiment. And I think that that's the best thing about sitting around the table with somebody who loves to cook wild game is I can cook a meal that didn't necessarily come to a fruition of what I thought it was going to. And yet we can stand around and work on pulling this meat off the bone and troubleshoot as we're doing it. And it's not like I'm sitting there offended that we're talking about that. It's that we're troubleshooting how to make it better.
Man, that's cooking.
Yeah.
You know, and I think I'm not a chef, but I have a lot of friends that are chefs, and like spending time with them and watching them interact, like guys are 10 times better cooks than I am. They do the same thing.
Yeah.
Like they'll eat and go, oh man, this would be really good if you did this or that. And you work through it. I mean, it's just like hunting or anything else. And I picked that up from them, and it's kind of like I can have my pride and say, not ask for feedback, or we can all sit around and talk and get a better product by the end of it. But no, for sure. It was awesome. I really enjoyed showing up here and cleaning them up.
Yeah. Well, Daniel's here for NWTF.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But we met back a few months ago. What was that, 6 months ago?
Yeah, it was like October, September, somewhere in there.
At a Wilderness event for women. And we love our Wilderness women.
You shout out to the Wilderness ladies.
They're great women, and y'all know that we love you. But we met there, and we're chit-chatting, and it was like, we need to meet up. We need to do a podcast. We need to have a conversation. We need to cook. Mm-hmm. So you were making it to Nashville, and you're like, we got to get together. I had invited my friend Pete to join us, who also loves to cook wild game. And he did not get to make it, and he's just busy with the convention. But he's also one of those people that you can sit around and troubleshoot things on. Awesome. Like, how would you add a little more heat to it? I was talking about the slaw tonight. I'd forgotten the radishes, and they add that little extra bite, that spice. And
it's hard to get that, to start a sidetrack, it's hard to get that same spice with like Tabasco or hot peppers or anything else. It almost has to. It's the crunch that opens up that flavor in the radish. And so, I don't know, you look at a meal and you enjoy it, but you also kind of think through, well, what can I add in the future? What would maybe pureeing the pear and adding it into the sauce, and then, like we said, add the sauce back into the meat as we were, like, there's just a whole lot of things that you start thinking of, and it doesn't take away from the meal. It enhances what it will be next time. Yeah. Yep, for sure. I think it's just constant improvement, you know. That part of my joy of hunting is cooking wild game for other people and sharing it with them, and it's like a form of fellowship in a lot of ways. And it's kind of like I always joke, like I'll go to something with my wife, and it'd be a much of non-hunting event, you know, and I'll find the one other guy that hunts, you know. And so it's kind of that, it's that camaraderie. The same thing when you're cooking wild game. There's not a lot of people that cook wild game well, and so like when you can meet someone else that does, I love it. It's just awesome.
Yeah. There are a couple people out there that I've been able to not just troubleshoot with, but get ideas for a project or, hey, I'm going hunting for this particular piece of meat that I will be bringing back. How do I need to quarter it out? How do I need to process it in a way that I will get the best afterwards for meals? Because when I process here in my kitchen, I am processing according to what I'm going to cook later.
100%.
Yeah.
I'm the same way. So that's like, because I process, so it's kind of funny. 2 weeks ago, I shot a buck in Alabama. It's the first year I've ever taken to a processor. And it was just, I was really tired. I was leaving the next day really early, so just kind of had to do that. But I always do that, man. I want to cut up, and I have in my mind, okay, so I'm going to cut up this many steaks in this way, part out, or I know all the shanks I'm going to cook with ossobuco, or make tacos out of it. So it's like I can leave some whole, I can cut some in half, and I'm the same way, man. I always cut. It's kind of funny. I very rarely eat backstrap because like I trim it really well and then give it to other people so they can experience that. Dude, that's always the.
That's a true gift.
It is, right? So, a buddy of mine and I were joking. I was like, I love some of the stuff I've been doing with shanks, and so it's like, man, I'd almost rather have the shanks than the backstrap. Backstrap is great. I love backstrap. Yeah. But it's like, everyone can cook backstrap, man. Like, show me something cool you can do with a shank or ribs or something.
Yeah. No, there's some creativity to it. I think that goes back to the evolution of a hunter.
For sure. Yeah.
Whether you are in the beginning just shooting anything that you can shoot, to then shooting specific targets that you have, to then teaching.
Yeah.
And sometimes those mix and mingle.
Yeah. I was going to say, the lines aren't hard, man.
Yeah.
A buddy of mine that I hunt with in Alabama, he's a very, very accomplished hunter. And so he's like a lot of southeastern hunters. They shoot a turkey and breast out, get out of there. First time I hunted with him, I'm like, no, we're plucking the whole bird. I'm going to take the leg. And he thought I was crazy. And then I made some sausage from the legs and cooked it for him. So the next year we came back. I have a thing about if I'm hunting, I want to eat the animal that I'm hunting, like at the same time. So kinda, you know, it doesn't really mean anything, but it's just in my head. But I made some turkey breakfast sausage for him. And he was like, wait, you made that with the legs? I was like, yeah. He goes, okay, I'm going to take legs out of every turkey I shoot now. And like, that dude's killed a lot of turkeys. He'd never done that. So I felt like that was a big win.
It changes how you respect the animal.
For sure.
When you have a plan for how you're going to prepare it later. It takes it from the very beginning of making sure that shot is good.
Yeah.
Because that affects your meat later. It's how you are going to field dress if you need to, get ice on it as soon as possible, or keep it in a cold place. It changes the whole dynamic when you are focused on that end result.
Yeah.
Whether you're going to share it with somebody that has never had it before, so you want to make sure that it tastes good.
Yeah.
Or to how you're feeding your own family or creating something beautiful that you want people to see. You don't just have to fry.
Yeah. Or make poppers and there's nothing wrong. Like, that stuff's good. Like, it's really delicious. But no, I joke. I go, when I see, you're waterfowl hunter, so you get this. When I see a duck set its wings and drops legs, my mouth starts watering. You know,
you're ready.
This really nice mallard. It's probably fat. It's eating a lot of corn. Like, oh man, it's going to be delicious. And, you know, a buddy of mine, we kind of coined it like prepare for success. So like, that means like if I go out in the field for deer hunting, I have a knife with me so I can field dress it there, you know, and stuff like that where, I mean, because you aren't always successful, but you want to be ready, you know, have a cooler in your truck. I mean, just have some of those things in place. Like, one of my biggest frustrations is when, like, I'll see on a Facebook page, you know, hey, I just shot a deer. Where's a good processor in whatever town? And it's like, I don't ever want to like get on somebody, especially new hunters, but it's like, hey man, you want to have that in place so you're not sitting there at, 11 o'clock at night trying to figure out where you're going to take this gut shot deer. And, man, that's, got to prepare for success and be ready.
Yeah, you do. And it's honoring what you're hunting in the same field. There's a big debate on this.
Okay.
Are you ready? Wet aging versus dry aging.
So I do both or neither. Like, okay, so I was talking to a buddy of mine at church about this. He asked me, I said, because he doesn't have a walk-in cooler, he doesn't have like a drying chamber, and the conditions outside weren't perfect for it. So with dry aging, the way I think about it is you shoot the deer, gut it, you can take the skin off, and then hang it. So unless you can control the humidity and the temperature, I don't think it's a viable thing to do. Yeah. Because, if you have swings of temperature and humidity, like that meat can go bad. Because with aging, you're a little bit of decay is happening to the meat, right? It tenderizes and concentrates flavor. So in my opinion, if you don't have a situation to do that for dry aging, it's better to cut it up, get in the freezer or whatever. Yeah. Wet aging, I will wet age. I do that a lot with ducks. Like because I've gotten ducks from people where there's no skin on. So the vacuum sealed breasts, I'll leave them in the fridge for like 4 or 5 days when I thaw them out and take them out. And that actually, I have noticed a distinct difference doing that. But in my mind, it's like you get a better end product by getting it into a cool situation faster than trying to worry about wet aging or dry aging. Right. And I've had like the elk I shot last January, it was like 20 degrees outside, like 0% humidity in Colorado. We quartered it up and hung it, and it was delicious. Now, elk's just delicious to start with. Right. I don't think that hanging was the difference, between good and bad. But I think a lot of people get hung up in that, and they don't get hung up on, like, how can I package this meat without getting freeze burn? How can I cook this on the back end? That's my thought on it. So yeah, I don't have a place for that. Yep. Being in the South. Yeah. It doesn't get, Yep. There's humidity all the time. Even at 0 degrees, you've got humidity. And so I have always butchered down, and I'll stick it in an unscented garbage bag. Yeah. Yep. And close it up, get all the air out, and close it up, and it'll sit in my fridge for 5 to 7 days. And that's great. And I didn't understand that was wet aging for a long time. Yeah. And I will, halfway through the week, I'll change the bag so it's not just sitting in blood. Yep. But
since doing that, I have felt like my venison has been better than immediately
thrown in the freezer. Well, and that's the thing too, is like, I've done the aging on the front and the back end, and there's some debate if that really works, if like aging on the back end works. I think, again, go back to like, what's the end result? I want a really good product. And a buddy of mine who's a guide in Colorado, he's like, dude, get the meat cold as fast as possible. And that's like, get the hide off, get it exposed to cold air. So if that's like packaging it up and putting it in a fridge, cool. If that's hanging outside where it's 0% humidity and like 20 degrees, or if you have a walk-in cooler that does all that for you, that's awesome. But I think so many people focus on like, I want to hang it underneath my deck or whatever. And it's like, man, unless you got the perfect setup, that's probably not the best idea.
Yeah. I also have, and I won't name anybody, no names, but I have some friends who stick their meat in water.
I was waiting for you to say that one. So.
And they age it.
Oh no.
In water, and it comes out white.
Yep.
And I think that people forget that when you cook a steak, rare, medium rare, and you cut it and red juice comes out, that's not blood.
Correct. Yep.
That's your flavor.
Yep.
And so when you drain your meat of all of that, you are robbing yourself of major flavor.
And like I've gone around and around.
Flavor.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I've gone around and around on this. Because the argument I've heard on that is like, well, I don't want to be gamey. I don't want it to be gamey. And so like, where the flavor comes in meat is from the fat, right? So if you're not trimming off the silver skin of the fat, that's where your gaminess comes from. Also, if you shoot a deer and let it like sit in water, it rots, and that's where some off flavor and gaminess comes from. And I've eaten deer that's like that, and you're like, I don't enjoy this. And and it's not how they age it. It rotted, so it's not any good. And so my thing is like, you can accomplish the goal of not having a gamey, quote unquote, animal, but soaking in water is not that route. And you're pulling, it's osmosis. So you're pulling stuff out of the meat and putting water in.
Yeah.
So at very best, you're taking flavor out of it and putting water in there. And man, I'm sure we could talk like endlessly about this, but I think so many people, wild game, there's no intermuscular fat, so they'll overcook it. And then it's tough. They don't handle it well in the field, so they call it gamey. It's really spoiled, and they don't think about how can I cook this muscle. Like a buddy of mine said, you wouldn't go to a store and buy like a $40 steak and a bottle of red wine and throw it in your back seat when it's like 80 degrees outside, and then go home and try to cook it and think it's going to taste good. It's not.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with wild game.
The other problem that I have found with soaking in water and then freezing,
oh man,
is that you are going to have, like, if you're soaking all of your meat before you then put it in the freezer, you then are crystallizing everything on the inside, and you're hurting, or you're bringing out the chance of freezer burn from the inside out.
And you make a really good point. So there's always cells inside meat, right? And so when you slowly freeze meat, you get big ice crystals. That's why ice cream works when you mix it and you cool it down to small ice crystals, and it's really creamy. So you get those big ice crystals, you soaked in water, you had a ton of water in there. And then when you thaw it out, there's all this juice that runs out. And that's, like you said, a lot of flavor, a lot of moisture, in the meat. And there's something to be said about maybe brining, but that's not what I see a lot of guys doing, man. Like you said, if I see the meat this white, like that's not going to be good.
Yeah.
Deer's red meat.
It is red meat. And I want it to be red meat.
For sure.
And for years, for almost 10 years, I've been serving venison to people who have never had venison before, and not one person has told me it's gamey.
Yep.
Some people have been able to tell the difference between it being beef and venison, but nobody has ever said, ooh, that has a gamey taste to it.
Yep.
And it's because of the process from the beginning to the grill. It's the whole process of it.
Yep.
But I just don't hate us if that's what you do.
And like that's the thing.
It's a challenge.
I was just say I don't want to sound judgmental when I say it. And I'm not talking down any processors. I have a lot of good friends that are butchers and do it for a living. But like, man, you learn a little bit about it, and even if it's when we did the Go Wild event with Wilderness, like I showed some women, just this is how you cut the backstrap out. So If you shoot your deer, skin it, cut the back strap out, and then start working with that. And then you can kind of build on, how do I quarter out a deer? What other parts do I want to take? How do I pull the tenderloins out? How do I fix the heart? So if you can start just a little bit, slowly by slowly, you can learn a lot. And man, the other thing too is, I hate wasting meat. That's like one of my biggest, especially if I've shot it, because like I just feel I don't want to get too spiritual, but I want to honor the animal,
right?
And I feel like God provided those animals for us, so we need to do what we can to use every bit of it and everything. But learn and be willing to like make mistakes, like those Sandhill Crane legs. Like that wasn't exactly what you wanted to come out of there, but we ended up, it was good. I enjoyed it. And so you got to kind of give yourself a little bit of grace on that and say, I may try something and it may not turn out good, but it'll be okay. And I learned for next time or something.
And try something different.
Yes.
And that, I think that's kind of where we're both coming from, is we're challenging you to maybe get outside of, I honor the way traditions are passed down generationally, but maybe take a step out and try something new with one of your deer, with something that I think that the last duck that I cooked with skin on, there's no brine. There's no, I let it dry in the fridge, skin, plucked the whole thing, put it in the fridge, skin on, and everybody says, brine it. And I didn't brine it. I just let it dry out, salted it, put fruit up underneath it, and smoked it. And it was delicious because I didn't let it sit in the fat. I let it drain. And it got crispy. And it was amazing. But I had always had this greasy, either fried or cooked too long, or just, there was something growing up, it was just not my favorite meat. And taking it outside of how you've always eaten it.
I always try to challenge people, like, just do one new dish this year. And whether that's like you take your deer to a processor and get everything cut up, that's fine. No problem there. But when you get those roasts or whatever, just go, okay, I'm going to do something different with this year. I'm not going to make a pot roast or whatever. What can I do? And there's like, I know this sounds really basic, but just Google like red meat, like a Korean beef kind of situation tonight. I've done bulgogi, which is very similar to Korean kind of marinade, and I love that one because you slice the meat real thin, marinate in that, and then just sear it. It's so funny because I have so many friends that are like, I don't like duck, it's livery or whatever. I'm like, well, you overcooked it, man, like I said, the biggest way that I grew was hanging out with chefs that cook conventional food and sitting there going, okay, how could I apply that to whatever, geese, ducks, and I learned my knowledge gained quite a bit when I started doing that.
Oh yeah. I watched, it was a Netflix series, and it was heat, fat. Oh, what was the other? Salt.
So there's salt, acid, heat.
Yes.
Yep.
And fat was in there.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And so watching that and learning alongside of that, you're learning what is going to make your meat taste better. And it is all of those. You need to have salt. Salt is needed. Your seasonings are needed, but salt is one of those that is really important. Acid breaks down and tenderizes. Your heat. Don't overcook. Don't undercook, but don't overcook. And then your fat. Venison doesn't have a lot of fat. So you've got to figure that out, whether it's through butter. Butter is my favorite fat other than bacon. Bacon is probably number one, and then butter, but or bacon grease. And then, or if you can find another, I don't know, oils are very
neutral flavored oils, right? I like
high temperature.
Correct.
Oils.
Grape seed oil is real high temperature, very neutral flavored. Some like extra virgin olive oils, but you can get a little fruity on that stuff. And so, 100%. And so salt. So my dad's a chemist, so I learned a lot about cooking from him and chemistry perspective. Salt helps your taste buds, transmit those signals. So it actually brings taste in food that
enhances,
enhances
yes.
it. Yeah. And a buddy of mine who's a chef, he says it gives your food context. Is the way he says it. And I think that's so true. And it's funny because I'll eat a soup or something and I'm like, there's not any salt in this. And I can immediately tell. And you put salt in, it adds body, it adds depth to it. So you're absolutely right. Salt. And like I said, the fat. So fat is flavor. You know, the reason guys like a big old ribeye is because there's a ton of fat in it.
And it's delicious.
It's delicious. It's,
it's
you know,
really good.
I love ribeyes. So, and you look at a deer backstrap, which is that same cut, and there's no fat. No fat. And the fat that is there is waxy, so you don't want that. So you're absolutely right. And so when I'm thinking about cooking, I'm thinking about, okay, how can I accomplish the goal with the limitations of no fat in there? You know, because fat's kind of a little bit of insurance, you know, for you. So if you overcook it a little bit, there's a lot of moisture with the fat. Well, that's not their wild game.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, depending on where you shoot that duck in its migration period, it can have a lot of fat. It can not have very much fat. And
turkey.
So, absolutely.
Holy moly. You've got it. Wild turkey is 100% different than your store-bought farm turkey.
And thank God, man. They're good.
They're really good. But it's almost like I want that checklist in front of me at the top of every recipe that I write.
Yeah.
It's like heat. What are your parameters for what you are about to cook? I did a turkey breast from my turkey this past year in Texas, and I did brine it. And then I wrapped it in a cracked pepper bacon. Okay. And I stuck it on the smoker. And I cooked it for a limited amount of time and got it up to probably right at 155. Okay. And then I wrapped it. And I didn't touch it till the next day. I put it in the fridge. And I didn't let the steam leave.
So there's some carryover cooking and
carryover cook. It probably hit that 160-ish area. Like, people are so afraid with white meat.
What's wrong with a little bit of food poisoning? Come on.
And you do need to be careful of it. Sure. But if you take it, if you cook it to 165 on the grill or in the oven,
it'll be
it's going to be overcooked. So if you cook it under and then wrap it, it's going to continue cooking. And then when it starts cooling and you put it in the fridge, it's going to maintain those juices.
Absolutely.
And so I had people stop by. I did a wild game dinner. That's what I served. And they said, wait, this was wild turkey? I said, yeah. And I didn't serve the bacon on it. I served it regular.
You sliced it and it was juicy. And
it was amazing. And it is, I was creative with it, and it sounds basic, but we could have eaten it that night. But I did want all of those juices to stay in versus opening it up and slicing it right there. I think that it would have lost a lot of its moisture.
One, we were talking earlier about barbecue. So, I'm from Kansas City, big barbecue town. And what barbecue is at its core is taking a tough piece of meat and making it really delicious. And how you do that is through, low heat, relatively low heat, 200, 225 degrees, and time, lots of time, and, a rub of some sort. So you think about that, like, a lot of that meat's going to be tough. So how do I make it less tough? Well, time, low heat. You give it time for stuff to break down. And that's absolutely right. And like you said, you tried something a little bit different. The Texas crutch, or you wrap it in the aluminum foil like that, and that's legit. I'm gonna have to try that.
Yeah,
I like that idea.
It turned out great, and I think that the bacon helps keep
for sure
that moisture in as well. So even though I didn't serve the bacon, I mean, I snacked on it, don't get me wrong, but I didn't serve it with it. I made little appetizers out of it with a cranberry drizzle over the top and a Brussels sprout. Like, it was a beautiful appetizer, but it was the best turkey I've ever tasted. And people are so afraid of wild turkey, and you can mess it up.
Yeah, you can. And again, that kind of goes back to, like, give yourself some grace.
Yes.
Try it. If it doesn't work, you feed it to the dog and kind of move on, and you chalk that up to experience. But if you don't step out, you don't get those cool results. And I kind of want to go back to talking about temperature cooking. So, like I said, I have 2 probe thermometers. We were talking about that earlier, instant read stuff. And, I have 2 little kids and a wife, and anytime I'm serving them something, I want to make sure, obviously, it's safe. But the example I always use is like scrambled eggs. So, a lot of times people will cook scrambled eggs. They're cooked in the pan, put it on the plate, and there's water running out of them. So if they're cooked in the pan, they'll be overcooked on the plate. And it's the same thing with meat, anything like that. When you get it, if you need to get it to 160, which is safe, get it to 155. And then, like you said, do a Texas country, wrap it up, and it'll carry over cook. It's on the way up. And that's one reason why I love sous vide.
Yes.
I need to get it to 125 degrees all the way through, for like a red meat, like a rare steak. Well, I can get it to 125 and then pull it out and sear it, and you're good to go.
It's perfect.
It's perfect,
It's a safeguard. It's kind of a crutch a little bit, but I will take it because I don't want to waste or ruin the meat that, and you were talking about slicing it thin and do it and searing. And I have actually taken my snow goose out, halfway thawed it, and sliced very thinly, and then put it in a vacuum seal bag with a marinade and sous vide it.
Well, and what a lot of people don't understand, like sous vides came from restaurants, right? So like the example I always use, like you've been in a convention, like 500 people in a room, and everyone orders a steak and it all comes within about 10 minutes. There's not a dude back there flipping steaks,
No.
They have bags full of sous vide steak, they pull them out, they sear them real quick, throw them on a plate, and that's the pickup. And so you think about it, like the really good steaks eaten in a lot of restaurants are usually sous vide. The reason they are is because you can get the perfect temperature all the way through, and then the outside seared. And like, I'm really glad I've seen sous vide catch on in home cooks. And, we're like your crock pot thing does sous vide option. And man, there's, it used to be, you had to buy like $600 or $700 thing. Now you can get a decent one for $100, $120, somewhere in there, or, a little bit more if you want some more features, but it's a very attainable thing.
It is. And it's something that when you have somebody in your life that loves to cook and they love to cook wild game, it's a great gift.
For sure.
I mean, I've, like you said, I've got this crock pot that has the feature on it, but I'd love to have one of them. My brother-in-law got one for Christmas this year, and I think I was drooling watching him.
Let me take a look at that. Let me help you get that started over there.
It's true. Sure. But no, I think that there's a lot to say about our community right now, the hunting community, and how we have banded together around feeding our families, being a priority in hunting. I think that is one of the easiest conversation starters with non-hunters. I think it's the easiest way to bring somebody around your table and introduce them to it. You just don't want to mess it up. And there's experimenting and there's that kind of thing, but I'm talking about messing up somebody's view of wild game through a bad dinner or through bad processing. And so, every single step is thought through. Every single step is purposeful, not just for the respect for the meat, but the respect of whoever's going to be eating it afterwards.
And I think one thing I realized when I started doing this, I cooked my whole life, but when I started really processing my own game and taking care of that, I thought it was this big whole thing, this big operation. You had to have these grinders and all this stuff, and really, you don't, and once you just put a little bit of effort into it, you can get a really good payoff. And I was talking to our friend Sharinda from Wilderness, and she was asking me about vacuum sealers, and I have a couple, but what I use more than anything is like saran wrap and butcher paper to package meat. And it's just thinking through things like that. Like there are some cool gadgets out there, and like sous vide's awesome. But there's some ways to get stuff not terribly expensive. You can use a lot of things you already have.
You can use a pan.
Yep.
Like I take my back straps and I'll cut them into single servings and put them in a pan with butter.
Butter
I sear and stick it in the oven to finish off temperature wise, and it's amazing.
And so that same idea with sous vide, like a reverse sear, right? Cook a steak in the oven up to the temperature you need it to be, and then, take it out and sear it. And so like you said, you don't need special equipment to do that. And even instant thermometers are like $20. There's a lot of good options out there. Cost has come down a lot of that stuff, but Google, man.
Google's great.
For sure.
It's great. And there are more recipes out there for wild game.
And real legitimate recipes. And what I mean by that is, like I said, I'm not trying to criticize someone that makes like Dove poppers or something, but there are so many more recipes than there used to be for wild game, like specifically for wild game. Not to plug anybody, but Hank Shaw, he does a fantastic job. And I I don't generally have to sign up for my email for stuff because I hate getting spam, but every week he'll send out a new recipe and they're really good.
Yeah.
Really, really good recipes. And they're legitimately technical recipes. They're still pretty attainable. And he always does a good job of answering questions and stuff on there. So I always tell people, if you're new to this or don't, to go look at Hank Shaw's website. I think it's Honest Food. And he has a couple books too, but that's to me a good way to kind of get your toe in the water and understand some of this stuff.
Yeah. There's basic recipes.
Yes. Yep.
There are kind of middle of the ground recipes. And then there's, if you're going to get fancy, they're out there too. So you can really, there's any level of Googleable recipes, if that's a word. Googleable.
Yeah, I think it's a word.
Okay. So if you had to pick three things, three pieces of equipment in the kitchen.
Oh man, that okay.
Only three.
So we already talked about instant read thermometer. Like I use that every time cooking any sort of meat.
Yeah.
A cast iron skillet.
Yeah.
That's well seasoned. And then number three, man.
And a good knife.
Yeah. Let's do that. A good chef's knife.
Yeah.
So that's one of my biggest frustrations. Like I'll often, if I'm going to cook, I'll travel with a knife because
There's nothing worse than no, there's nothing worse.
I have this joke because I do a lot of wild game cooks and stuff, and I'll be, hey, I'm gonna come do this, and don't worry, I have everything you need, and I'm like, I guarantee you don't. And that's not to be rude, but it's like I'm just gonna bring my own stuff. But
I went to Texas and brought all my stuff.
I have a bin full of cooking gear that I take with me wherever I go.
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure I have the right stuff I need. I'll even take my cast iron skillet with me sometimes, and I always joke because I'll pull jars of a mason jars of stock and all this stuff because I want to make sure it's good. But
I mean, I've got my bacon grease in the fridge right now.
Well, what good cook doesn't?
You have to keep it. My nana said you always have your jar.
That's right.
You can use it for anything. You can use it for vegetables, for biscuits, it's always in there.
Yep.
I was trying to think of what I would have, and I think that the good knife was number one for me. The thermometer, I could not live without my meat thermometers.
Yep. And
I was going back and forth on my third one. A good pan is important.
So you got your three are knife,
thermometer, and then I would probably pick butter.
Yeah, butter's pretty revolutionary.
Real Irish cream
I took
butter.
a peek in your fridge earlier. You got some Kerrygold butter in there, which is that
favorite.
So I read a really good book recently. It's The Good Book of Southern Baking by Kelly Fields. She's out of Louisiana, has a really cool restaurant there, and she has a whole page about butter and why you need high fat butter and good quality fat butter. And that's you're absolutely right.
I'll tell you, the reason that I got onto Kerrygold was before I started cooking wild game, and it was because my son was lactose intolerant, but he could handle Kerrygold butter.
Yep.
It's that high fat content protected his gut as it went through. Not that I wanted to hurt him with dairy, but I'm sorry, but you cannot brown fake butter.
No, and brown butter.
You burn it.
I was going to say, brown butter is delicious.
It's amazing.
Yep.
No, I've tried it before, and it just burns, and it smells like burned oil.
And I don't have margarine in my house. I can't cook with that. And nothing against someone who chooses to do that or is cannot eat any sort of dairy. But man, really high quality butter, European butter is what's often called sometimes if you can't find the Kerrygold brand. But it's just the high fat, 82%. Oh yeah.
Some good Amish butter that's full cream in there. There's just, we've got an Amish store down the road that you can get the big logs.
Yeah.
Amish butter.
Yeah.
But I think that would be my third. I didn't ask you ingredients. I asked you equipment.
And that's fine. You cheat a little bit. It's your podcast, and you can do that. I'll allow it.
I cheated. I don't know. A good grill maybe would be. But I've never been a griller. And so to kind of ease into grilling, I have a pellet grill.
Dude, pellet grills are amazing. I did a podcast with a buddy of mine who's a competition barbecue cook, and I was like, what are your thoughts? He goes, I have 3 of them. Yeah. That's what he said. And he goes, dude, if guys 20 years ago, they were competing and they had them, they would have used them.
Yeah.
It's
you just need to get one that gets to a high temperature.
Yes. Yep. So you can get that sear, 500 degrees.
Yeah.
And some of the Traegers do that. And there's a ton of them out there now. Get a good quality one. Obviously with anything, you want kind of higher quality. So you don't have to keep buying them or it breaks down. But pellet grills are amazing. And the reason is kind of like with the sous vide where I can get a really consistent temperature for a long period of time.
Yeah. And it's a good way if you have never been a person who uses a grill, it's an easy way to get into it. I think. I think it's kind of like getting into hunting. For some non-hunters, a gun is very intimidating.
For sure.
They can't pull back on a bow. And we can argue all day long about crossbows one way or another. But if you are introducing somebody to hunting and you want to get them out hunting and you're hunting on public land, getting out during archery season is easier.
And there's more opportunity. It's, you know, shooting a bow is difficult. It's not super easy.
Yeah.
And not that I'm not trying to poo-poo on crossbow hunters, but it is a little bit easier, a little more attainable. And man, you know, for my job, we do a lot of demos with guns. And my goal at the end of the day is for someone to have a positive experience with a firearm, because the more of those positive experiences you have, the more chance we have of getting pro hunter legislation, pro firearms legislation, and just being able to expand our sport, more access to land. You know, if you can get more people, maybe they don't end up being a hardcore hunter, but if they're like, dude, hunting's not bad, it's a good thing.
Yes.
That's a huge win. And so whatever you can do to get that person in the field and experience it, you know, they can hear the woods waking up and, you know, get to watch a deer run by, all that stuff. If you can get them to have those exciting moments, and if that takes putting a crossbow in their hand, that's a win. That's a win all day long.
It is a win. And I don't know, it's just, and with kids, getting them out in archery season, I don't know. I think that you have to pick wins.
Yes.
You have to pick successes. It doesn't mean that you get an animal that time, but you have to pick successes for somebody when you're introducing.
Well, and I think you got to look at what's the goal. What's the goal, right? You know, the goal obviously be for them to shoot a giant buck and have a great time. But really, the real goal is for them to have a good time, positive experience, and maybe have some success or have the opportunity to have some success.
Yeah.
So the best way to do that is with a crossbow if they don't have a lot of experience with the gun. You know, and you and I both know, like the first time you shoot a gun, I know you had some problems with shotgun last year, a couple of them. It's kind of, you know, even a seasoned hunter or shooter like yourself, it can kind of freak you out a little bit shooting it, you know. And I've had guns blow up in my hands. I apprentice gunsmith, spent a lot of time around guns, and you can get a little gun shine. So imagine taking someone who's never done any of that, maybe before they were kind of anti-gun or kind of afraid of that sort of stuff. Like, you don't want to. One of my biggest pet peeves is when someone's like, yeah, man, I gave my kid this giant 12 gauge and knocked him on his butt. And it's like, yeah, that's a great way to turn people off from the sport.
I have had conversations with people who have not shot guns because of that experience.
Yeah.
But it kind of, all that goes into cooking. I wouldn't hand somebody who has never cooked wild game before, I would not hand them bone marrow.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
I wouldn't hand them a roast, honestly, because roasts are hard with venison. I would hand them a backstrap or ground meat and say, go cook something that you are used to cooking with this.
Yeah. And there's like, and I'm glad you mentioned ground meat, because I think a lot of people, myself included, I do a lot of whole muscle cuts. I have a really nice grinder. I have a great setup to do that, but ground meat is very familiar to people, you know, and even if you cut it with a little bit of fat to help them out, kind of add some of that insurance there, you're absolutely right. If you can get them having success with ground meat, they're like, you know, that wasn't gamey. That's not bad. Let me try a steak.
Let me try.
And there's a lot of good stuff you can make ground meat.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's why Hunters for the Hungry. It's all ground. You know, I work for a company that's what we do. We handle Hunters for the Hungry for Tennessee, and it is ground meat that we hand out, and that's because it can be utilized so many different ways. That being able to donate that gives them opportunity for so much more. So don't underestimate the value of that ground meat. The kids love it.
Tacos, super easy to make tacos. And
I don't put fat in mine.
That's okay.
I keep it all lean, and then I will add the fat on the back end.
And I go back and forth. I have some with fat, some without.
Sausage is different.
I'll make sausage.
Yeah, sausage is different.
I know a lot of guys will put, 50% fat in there. I'm not quite there. You know, I cut back probably 20, maybe 30% if I'm making like a sausage. But I think to me it's approachableness and setting up for a win, right?
Yes.
That's for sure. You can make lettuce wraps with, some Asian inspired lettuce wraps, all sorts of stuff you do with ground meat.
Oh yeah. the stuffed peppers, lasagna, like these familiar things that they can sit there and go, well, that didn't taste any different, or it tastes better.
Yeah, or like, that was deer? I didn't even know. So it's kind of funny. So like, I'll occasionally buy steaks or other meat, but 90% of what we eat in my house is wild game. And that's not, I'm trying to be superior. I hunt a lot and have a lot of wild game, and I don't want to waste money on other stuff. And so if I didn't have ground meat in the freezer, it'd be a lot more work, because I can make a meatloaf, I can make meatballs, I can make like tacos. Like I said, just real quick, on a Wednesday night when you've been working all day, it's nice to grab a pound of frozen ground out of the freezer and just make something simple with it. So to me, it's a convenience thing. Like, it is. I do like to do some awesome stuff, but man, ground meat's pretty versatile. It is. And I mean, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you get to the end of that paycheck, and when you have wild game in the freezer, I mean, some of those nights that were on the end of that paycheck, the kids and I are eating good because we're going to pull that extra out and have a delicious meal because there's no other ingredients needed for it. Or make some spaghetti sauce with some tomatoes. Hamburger helper. Like you can make hamburger helper with ground meat. It's, you're absolutely right. Yeah. Absolutely right. So, Daniel. Amy, thank you so much. We could keep going. I was going to say, I got some stuff I got to do tomorrow. But I feel like a total bum, Amy. I just showed up and ate your food, which I'm very thankful for. So. That's what the invitation was for. And I will make it up to your place and do the same thing. That works. But I will see you in a couple days. That's right. Because I'll be coming over Friday and Saturday. But thank you for coming. Thanks for helping me pull those. Yeah. I got here, there was 4 of them, and you started working on one. I was like, this is going to take a while. I'll wash my hands here. And you were very quick giving me a cutting board. I think I understood the assignment. I knew it was coming. You did. And yeah, the kids leaned in and ate. Everybody loved it. Everybody loved it. It was good. Well, thank you very much. Thank you.